My name Nora Reyes and I'm 29 years old. I used to think I had a handle on everything. I had my life planned, my career moving in the right direction, and my future, well, it was mine to shape. I've worked hard to get here, to live in this city, this apartment, with just enough space to breathe, just enough peace to keep the chaos of the world at bay. But that night, I knew something in my life was unraveling, even before it all came crashing down. It started with a text from Ethan. He'd sent me the link to an exclusive rooftop restaurant in downtown Denver, one of those places that charges you more for a meal than most people pay for their rent. He wanted us to go, to splurge, to indulge in a tasting menu that cost $200 per person. I stared at the text for a long time, trying to grasp the enormity of what he was asking. $2,400 for one dinner. That was the price of my rent and utilities for the entire month. That could pay off half my student loan or, God forbid, buy me a used car if my car ever broke down. It was, to me, a reckless amount of money for a single evening of indulgence. I wasn't opposed to luxury or to treating myself now and then, but not like this, not at the expense of my future. Ethan had always been the live in the moment type, the influencer, the man with a brand, a life full of curated aesthetics and feminine energy. To be honest, when I first met him, I thought it was kind of charming, how his Instagram was filled with sponsored trips, luxurious outfits, and endless smiles. He had a way of convincing me that I was part of something special. But lately, the requests had been escalating. More extravagant dinners, weekend getaways, to places I couldn't even pronounce, gifts that cost more than my car payment. And each time I hesitated, I could feel the pressure mounting, like I was failing some test I didn't even know I was taking. This dinner was just the latest in a long line of financial demands, though I had always tried to be understanding. So I tried to explain as calmly as I could that $12,200 per person was too much. I was saving for a down payment on a house, something that mattered more to me than a single meal. I suggested that maybe we could cook something at home, enjoy a quiet evening instead. The response came an hour later. Real women don't talk about money, they just handle it. I could feel my chest tighten as I read his words. The finality of it, the judgment. And I wasn't the kind of woman who let things like this slide. So I sat there for a while, staring at my phone, unsure of how to respond. Part of me wanted to write back and tear into him, ask him how he could be so callous, so out of touch. But instead, I chose a quieter approach. I decided to be practical. I didn't respond immediately. I just turned off my phone, walked away from it, and went about my evening. That night, when I checked my social media, it was there. Ethan had posted a message, no tag, but it was clearly about me. It read, "If he budgets, he is not your man. He is your accountant." The caption was a long ramble about how real men didn't talk about finances, how they handled everything without discussing the numbers. It had the usual talk about masculine energy and being a provider. I felt the sting of humiliation wash over me. I didn't know what to do with that kind of pain, the kind that comes when someone you love turns you into the villain for being responsible. I wasn't asking for extravagance. I wasn't demanding perfection. All I wanted was balance. But to Ethan, that wasn't enough. The next day at work, it became clear that Ethan had won. People started sending me screenshots. Coworkers, acquaintances, even people I hadn't spoken to in years. Everyone had seen it. Everyone was talking about it. Some of them sent me private messages, checking in, but the look in their eyes, the pity, was unmistakable. One guy from the office pulled me aside. "Hey, is everything okay with you and Ethan?" he asked, genuinely concerned. I nodded, forcing a smile. "Yeah, it's fine." But it wasn't fine, not even close. That night, I couldn't sleep. I kept replaying that post in my head, the public humiliation, the way Ethan had twisted everything to make me look like the villain. I wasn't perfect. I never claimed to be. But I had worked hard for everything I had, and I wasn't about to let someone manipulate me into spending it on their fantasies. So I did what I knew best. I opened my laptop, created a new spreadsheet, and started going through every receipt, every Venmo transaction, every credit card statement. I wasn't going to let Ethan's words stand without the truth. 4 hours later, I had it all laid out. Dinners, gifts, trips, even coffee runs and groceries. It totaled up to $9,870.42. And it felt wrong. It felt wrong that I had given so much emotionally and financially to someone who never appreciated it. I made it pretty, added colors, broke it down by category, and then I posted it online with one simple caption: "Real women don't talk about money. Let the math speak." The aftermath of posting the spreadsheet was nothing short of chaos. I didn't expect the wave of responses, at least not like this. It started slow, just a few texts, some comments, but then my phone blew up. Notifications came through faster than I could check them. Ethan called 17 times. Each call went unanswered. Instead, I stared at my screen, rereading my post. I was calm. The numbers didn't lie. The math was simple. No amount of gaslighting or emotional manipulation could change that. I wasn't prepared for the response from Ethan's followers, though. The internet, always quick to form opinions, didn't hesitate to react. By the time I woke up the next morning, I had already received dozens of messages. At first, they were supportive. Friends, family, even people I barely knew telling me they were proud of me for standing my ground. But as the day went on, something unexpected started to happen. Ethan's post, the one where he had so publicly mocked me, started to backfire. People started questioning his integrity, his choices. His followers began to drop off, one by one, many of them unfollowing him outright. It wasn't a huge amount at first, but there was a shift. His engagement numbers dropped. My coworker Rachel called me. "Hey, I just saw Ethan's post. What's going on with you two? Everything okay?" I laughed bitterly. "Yeah, sure, just peachy." "Look, I don't know what's going on, but, some people at the office are worried. They think he might be financially abusive." The words hit harder than I expected. I wasn't sure if Rachel was trying to comfort me or if it was just her being blunt. But the idea that people thought I was in an abusive relationship made my stomach twist. It made me question everything I had tolerated from Ethan, every time he'd pushed me to the edge with his extravagant demands, with the way he'd made me feel small for sticking to my own financial goals. But Rachel wasn't the only one. The texts kept coming, mostly from people who had seen Ethan's post or the thread where I had shared the spreadsheet. Some were supportive, others more concerned, asking if I was okay, if Ethan was being manipulative. But one thing was clear: Ethan's carefully crafted image was starting to crack. By the time the night came, I hadn't heard from him. The silence made me uneasy, but I refused to cave. I had done the right thing. I had shown the truth in black and white. The spreadsheet didn't lie. But it wasn't the facts that kept me awake. It was the realization that Ethan wasn't the person I thought he was. I couldn't shake the feeling that I had been played. Not just in my relationship, but in his entire public persona. Ethan had built an entire brand on the idea of luxury, how women should be treated like queens, how men should spend on them to show their worth. I had bought into it too. For months, I had been willing to contribute, to play the role of supportive girlfriend, to show up in ways that felt like partnership. But now I was seeing it for what it was, a scam. I lay in bed that night, staring at the ceiling, and the more I thought about it, the more everything clicked into place. The trips, the dinners, the gifts that I had bought for him, thinking I was just being generous. He never once offered to pay me back, and in fact, whenever I hesitated, I could see his disappointment, his quiet manipulation. Then came the unexpected twist, the text from Lindsay, Ethan's former roommate. I didn't know what to expect when I agreed to meet her, but when she sat across from me at the coffee shop, she came armed with receipts, literal, physical receipts in a folder, and it wasn't just the rent money Ethan had skipped on. Lindsay had been trying to get Ethan to pay her back for months, over $6,000 worth of unpaid rent when they had lived together 2 years ago. It was an ongoing saga of "I'll pay you next month," excuses, and broken promises. Ethan had been stringing her along, deflecting with stories about brand deals and business expenses. The same lies he had used on me. Only this time, the numbers didn't add up. But the most damning part was the charity. Lindsay told me about love, luxury, kindness, the supposed charity Ethan had started, a charity he claimed helped women escape abusive relationships. Lindsay had volunteered at the shelter Ethan had partnered with, and, shockingly, none of the money raised had ever gone to them. Not a cent. Lindsay had asked Ethan where the money had gone, and he had claimed it was on hold, waiting for the right organization. A year later, still nothing. I felt the bile rise in my throat. The charity had been nothing more than a front. Ethan had used it to collect donations for his own business, his luxury lifestyle. The clothes, the expensive shoes, the jewelry that he wore, all funded by the donations he claimed were going to help women in need. But none of it was true. None of it had ever been true. Lindsay had the screenshots. She had the messages where Ethan admitted the donations were helping fund photo shoots for his brand, not actual charity. She showed me a few. I know it's not ideal, but I'm building a platform to help more women. Once it's bigger, we'll give back. It was the same excuse he'd used on me for everything, always waiting for the right moment, always justifying his extravagance as an investment. I couldn't sit with this information for long. I knew what I had to do. So I helped Lindsay compile everything: the unpaid rent receipts, the screenshots of Ethan's admissions, the bank statements that showed the donations had never been transferred. We made everything clear, concise, irrefutable. And then we posted it. It wasn't about revenge. It wasn't even about hurting Ethan. It was about the truth, about exposing the facade. I clicked post and I sat back, watching the reaction unfold. The night I posted everything felt like standing on the edge of a cliff, watching the wind carry the truth into the world. I knew there was no going back, but I didn't care. The weight had lifted from my shoulders as soon as I hit send. I had done what I needed to do. What happened next was nothing short of explosive. At first, it was just a few comments, people expressing shock, some even sharing their own experiences with Ethan. But within hours, the post was everywhere. Ethan's brand, his entire persona, was beginning to unravel. The people who had blindly supported him, who had believed his image of the successful, high-value man, were starting to question everything. It was like a domino effect. People who had been fans of Ethan's brand were now tagging each other, pulling up his old posts, asking questions, digging deeper. Someone dug up a video of Ethan's charity launch, a polished, professional event where he had presented slides on domestic violence, talked about helping women escape abuse, and showed photos of women who benefited from his donations. But when people started reaching out to the shelters he claimed to support, the response was chilling. None of the shelters had received a penny. I sat in my living room, staring at my phone as the comments piled up. People had started to dig into Ethan's past, bringing up the luxury items he had purchased during charity campaigns. They began posting photos of him wearing bags, shoes, and accessories, some of them still tagged from old Instagram posts. People were connecting the dots. His followers, the ones who had believed in him, were now questioning everything. I had no part in it anymore. It wasn't my fight. But seeing Ethan's empire crumble before my eyes brought a strange sense of satisfaction. Watching him be exposed, watching his credibility erode as quickly as the followers fell away, made me realize just how much damage he had done. And then came the messages, not just from strangers, but from women I barely knew, telling me they had been manipulated by Ethan too. They'd never thought to question him, not until the tide started to shift. But I wasn't here to play the hero. I was just here to make sure the truth was out. And that's exactly what I had done. 2 days later, Ethan posted again. The video was a mess. His hair was unkempt, his eyes red, and his makeup, which was usually flawless, was smudged down his face. The tears, the drama. It was like a performance. He cried, claiming he was being attacked, that he was the victim of a smear campaign. I never meant to hurt anyone, he sobbed, looking directly into the camera. I've been emotionally manipulated and financially abused. I don't deserve this. His followers, those who hadn't already unfollowed him, rallied behind him. But it didn't last long. People quickly noticed the glaring inconsistencies in his sob story. A screenshot of Ethan wearing the very same luxury bracelet he had shown off in his Instagram posts, claiming it was a gift from a partnership with a luxury brand, started circulating. Except the brand, when contacted, confirmed they had never worked with Ethan. The bracelet had been bought by him, not gifted. The comment section went wild. It wasn't the first time someone had caught him in a lie, and it wouldn't be the last. Then came the ultimate blow. A post on Reddit had started to go viral, a thread exposing Ethan's Monetize the Masculine Energy coaching program. It was a paid course that Ethan had developed for women. The description was laughable, teaching women to manipulate their partners into spending money by testing their provider mentality. It was all about extracting money from men, about never accepting financial responsibility and treating relationships like transactions. The comments were jaw-dropping. Screenshots surfaced of Ethan coaching women on how to play their boyfriends, telling them to never offer to split the bill, to demand extravagant gifts early on, and even to cancel the subscription if the man showed signs of being tight with money. I felt sick to my stomach. The realization hit me like a slap to the face. I had been a case study in Ethan's course. One message was still burned into my memory. If he budgets, he's broke. Move on. Men are investments. You do not stay with a bad stock. I was that bad stock. My heart twisted. All this time, I had been the one giving, the one trying to build something real, while Ethan had been using me as a lesson on how to manipulate men. His followers turned on him quickly. No one wanted to follow a man who turned relationships into games, who had manipulated countless women, including me. That night, I received another message from Lindsay. She told me something that shocked me. Ethan was planning on using the last of his influence to create a comeback by positioning himself as the victim of an abusive relationship, claiming I had financially controlled him, that I had forced him to spend beyond his means. The irony was not lost on me. Ethan's comeback was nothing more than a desperate attempt to rebuild the walls of his crumbling empire, and he was willing to manipulate the truth once again to salvage whatever image he had left. But the truth was out there. It couldn't be erased. Not this time. Ethan was done. And no matter how much he cried or how much he tried to rebrand himself, he couldn't rewrite the story. It wasn't just about the money anymore. It was about exposing the man behind the mask, about showing the world who he really was. The internet did its job. Ethan's sponsors dropped him. His engagement tanked. The charity campaign that had once been a saving grace was revealed to be a fraud. The money he had stolen from generous people went right back to the women who needed it the most. And Ethan? He disappeared. The last I heard, he had moved away, trying to start over somewhere else. I didn't care to follow his trail anymore. But it didn't end there. The truth had a funny way of spreading. Ethan's story became a cautionary tale, one that would be told over and over, especially by women who were tired of being manipulated by men who promised the world and only delivered lies. And as for me, I didn't feel like a victim. I felt like a survivor. It felt like the world was breathing down my neck, waiting for the next chapter to unfold. I had exposed Ethan, watched his entire brand fall apart, and yet, I knew this wasn't quite over. People like him didn't go down without a fight. The silence was eerie, but I wasn't naive enough to think he'd just disappear. What came next was the final pathetic attempt at salvaging his reputation. 2 days after Ethan's last social media meltdown, I received an email from a strange address, legal@cloakurits.co. At first I thought it was spam, but then I saw the subject line, cease and desist. The email was a masterpiece of legalese, full of vague threats and all the right buzzwords. Defamation, emotional distress, reputational damage. It demanded that I remove all posts about Ethan immediately and claimed that I would face a lawsuit for damages, $100,000 specifically. The email was signed by someone named Richard Thompson, attorney at law. It was official sounding enough to make my stomach twist for a moment, but as I read on, the cracks began to show. The first thing that set off alarm bells was the email address itself, cloakurits.so. Why would an attorney's office be using a personal brand domain? No law firm would ever operate like that. And then there was the language. It was too generic. I had seen enough TV shows and read enough articles to know when something didn't feel right. I forwarded the email to my sister, who worked as a paralegal. 10 minutes later, she called me, laughing. "Seriously, Nora, this is a joke," she said between giggles. "The letter's fake. The formatting's all wrong, and Richard Thompson isn't even a real attorney." I did a search. He doesn't exist. This is literally a template you could download off any free legal document website. No bar number, no law firm. Just someone trying to scare you. I couldn't help but laugh, too. Of course, Ethan would try something like this. He'd already tried to manipulate me emotionally. Now, he was trying to scare me into silence. But it wasn't going to work. I wasn't afraid anymore. I posted the email online, along with a little note. Apparently, fake lawyers work for free. I could feel the satisfaction in my chest as I clicked post. This was the final nail in Ethan's coffin. There was no coming back from this. The internet immediately picked up on the absurdity of his legal threat. People in the comments started to dissect the letter, pointing out every flaw, every red flag. Memes started popping up. One meme had Ethan's face photoshopped into a courtroom with the caption, "When you try to sue for defamation but can't afford a real lawyer." Another had the email address turned into a punchline, "Clokeritz. Sounds like a boutique law firm in a mall." My phone buzzed constantly, notifications flooding in. People were tagging Ethan's former followers, spreading the word about his final, desperate attempt to manipulate. Even some of the influencers who had once supported him started posting their own stories, talking about how they had felt uneasy about him for a while but didn't know how to speak up. By the time the morning came, Ethan's followers had completely abandoned him. His engagement dropped to nothing. It was clear to everyone who had been paying attention. Ethan had lost. But I wasn't done yet. I sat at my desk, sipping my coffee, and pulled up my social media. I noticed a new notification. Ethan had unfollowed me. I smirked, feeling a strange sense of closure. He was trying to erase me from his life, but he couldn't take back what he'd done. He couldn't unring that bell. That's when I saw it. A new post from Ethan. His Instagram story was up, a grainy video with him sitting in what looked like a hotel room, his face puffy from crying. His makeup was smeared, like he'd been wiping his eyes too hard. "I just want to apologize," he said, his voice thick with emotion. "I never meant for any of this to happen. I know I messed up, but you all need to understand that it wasn't my fault. It's all just been so overwhelming, and now my whole life's been ruined." His tears seemed more for show than for any real remorse. As he rambled on about how he was the real victim in this story, I couldn't help but feel a sense of disgust. This wasn't an apology. It was an attempt to reclaim some of the power he had lost. The worst part? The video was littered with fake sobs, dramatically wiping his eyes as if he'd been crying for days. It was hard to watch, but I didn't need to watch it. I had already won. It was funny in a way. Ethan had spent so much time building up this image of the successful, high-value man. But in the end, it wasn't the luxury dinners or the fancy clothes that mattered. It was the truth. And the truth had a way of showing up when you least expected it. Ethan had tried to bury it, to silence it, but the internet had done its job. And as for me, I had done my part. I had stood up for myself when it mattered most. That night, I went out with some friends. It felt strange. No pressure, no anxiety, no Ethan watching over my shoulder, manipulating me. We had dinner, we laughed. We talked about everything except him. For the first time in months, I felt free. And then came the message. It was from Maya. "I'm proud of you, Nora," it said. "You handled this with more grace than anyone could have imagined." I smiled. She was right. I had handled it. And for the first time in a long time, it felt like everything was falling into place. The day that followed was almost too quiet. It was the kind of silence that settles in after the storm, leaving everything feeling heavier than it had before. The truth had been exposed, Ethan's image was shattered, and the internet had done its work. Yet I couldn't shake the feeling that there was something else coming, something I hadn't anticipated. I just didn't know what. 2 days passed without a word from Ethan. No more public sob stories, no more fake lawyers. He had vanished from my feed, his brand erased as quickly as it had been built. I almost felt relief. But of course, when you deal with someone like Ethan, the silence doesn't last long. And then, just as I was starting to settle into my new life, it happened. A notification popped up on my phone, a Venmo payment. I froze. I didn't recognize the name at first, but the amount sent me reeling. $9,870.42. The exact amount I had calculated in that spreadsheet. The total from everything I had spent on him over the last 10 months. It was from Ethan. My heart raced. What was this? Some final attempt at manipulation? I didn't know what to think. I clicked into the transaction to read the memo line, praying it wasn't what I thought it was. There it was, a tiny link. I clicked it against my better judgment and found myself staring at a GoFundMe page. The title made my blood run cold. Surviving Financial Abuse. The page described how Ethan had been financially controlled by an ex-girlfriend, me. It detailed how I had tracked every penny he spent and demanded repayment for normal relationship expenses. According to the campaign, I had used a spreadsheet to abuse him financially and humiliate him publicly. I felt my stomach turn. She had spun the story so convincingly, painted herself as the victim of a cruel, controlling man. My name was smeared across the page as the villain, while Ethan had played the role of the poor, misunderstood soul. The caption read, "I need help escaping the financial burden my ex has placed on me. Please help me recover from this emotional and financial abuse. I can't do this on my own." I stared at the page for a long time, feeling sick. How could he do this? After everything that had happened, how could he turn the story around like this? But then the reality hit me. This wasn't just about Ethan anymore. This was manipulation at its finest. He had taken the money from his own pocket, money he probably didn't even have, and paid me back with it, hoping I'd take it and move on, hoping I'd never confront the truth. But I couldn't let him get away with it. Not after everything he had done, not after the way he had tried to turn the tables on me. I took a deep breath and decided to act. I didn't keep the money, not for a second. Instead, I spent hours researching women's shelters in Denver. Real shelters, ones that actually helped women escape abusive situations, ones that didn't just exist for the sake of a branded charity or a photo op. It took some time, but I found the right one. They had real reviews, real financial transparency, and, more importantly, they were genuinely doing good work. I transferred every last cent of the $9,970.42 to them. Every penny Ethan had paid me back, I gave to a place that actually made a difference. Then I made the post. I logged into my social media accounts, pulling up the GoFundMe page, the Venmo transaction, and the donation receipt from the shelter. With a few taps, I shared them. And I wrote the caption. She paid, but not from her wallet. I did what was right. These funds went where they were truly needed, directly to women in need, to women who really needed the help. Within hours, the post went viral. The shelter's thank you post appeared on their Instagram page, thanking the anonymous donor for their generous contribution. The comment section was filled with people congratulating me for doing the right thing. And from there, it spread. News outlets started picking up the story. GoFundMe investigated Ethan's campaign and shut it down within 24 hours. The donors who had contributed to Ethan's cause were refunded, every last cent. As for Ethan, well, he tried to fight back, but this time there was no escaping the truth. I didn't hear from him again. His Instagram was gone. His brand disappeared. No more posts, no more courses, no more fake apologies. Ethan had been exposed for who he truly was, and there was no coming back from that. But as I sat there watching everything unfold, I felt peaceful. Finally, the phone buzzed again. It was Maya. I smiled, feeling the weight lift off my chest. That's the kind of math I believe in, her message read. And for the first time in months, I felt a real connection. A connection based on trust, honesty, and respect. Values I had almost forgotten in the wake of everything that had happened with Ethan. We talked for hours that night about integrity, values, and what it meant to build something real together. That night, as I lay in bed, I thought about the journey I'd been on. It wasn't just about Ethan anymore. It was about reclaiming my own life, my own integrity. It was about learning that the only kind of relationship worth having is one built on fairness, on mutual respect, and on shared values. Not one where the numbers are manipulated, where someone's controlling the equation. And the more I thought about it, the more I realized that in the end, it wasn't about the money at all. It was about the truth. And the truth had a funny way of showing up when you least expect it. The days after the dust had settled were surprisingly peaceful. I'd spent so much time consumed by Ethan, by the manipulation, the lies, the humiliation. It had felt like my world had been out of control. But now, with Ethan gone from my life for good, I could finally exhale. I wasn't just surviving anymore, I was living. Maya and I had met through a mutual friend, and our connection was immediate. She was different from anyone I had ever dated. We talked about everything, our careers, our past relationships, our hopes for the future. But what struck me the most was how equal it felt. There was no power struggle, no trying to prove who was more important, more successful, or more worthy. We split everything, dates, meals, even bills. It wasn't a transaction, it was a partnership. Maya told me about her work. She was a software engineer, designing apps for nonprofits to track donations transparently. I was fascinated by the idea. It felt so aligned with everything I believed in now. Maybe we could collaborate, she said one evening over dinner. You've got an accountant's mind, and I've got the tech skills. Together we could build something that actually helps people. The thought of building something meaningful with her felt natural. The idea that our combined talents could create something that mattered made my heart race. It wasn't about money, it was about impact, about doing the right thing and not hiding behind a fake persona. Life after Ethan felt simple. And I'd never realized how much I had longed for simplicity until I experienced it again. I didn't have to worry about whether I was being tested, whether my every move would be scrutinized. I wasn't walking on eggshells anymore. Maya and I could just be. The morning after our dinner, I woke up to a message from Lindsay. She had sent me a photo of a news article with the headline, "Local Influencers Fake Charity Exposed. Donor Money Redirected to Designer Goods." The story detailed everything Ethan had done: the fake charity, the false promises to donate, and the way he had scammed both followers and donors alike. The article even mentioned how the shelter I had donated the money to had received the full amount from Ethan's GoFundMe campaign, thanks to my decision to take out action. And then it hit me. We had done it. We had exposed Ethan for who he truly was, but more than that, we had turned his manipulation into something positive. Maya and I decided to move forward with the app project she had suggested. Together we began working on it, something that would help people track donations, making sure every penny was spent transparently and effectively. It was a huge challenge, but it was one we faced together. We both felt the weight of the responsibility, but there was a freedom in knowing we were building something real. We were no longer just surviving, we were creating. And as we sat side by side, coding late into the night, I couldn't help but think about how far I had come. From the confusion of my relationship with Ethan to the clarity I had now, I had been taught to question everything, to always look behind the curtain, to never let someone else control the story. And with Maya, I had found someone who shared those values, someone who wanted to build something based on trust, on fairness, on partnership. No manipulation, no lies, just two people working toward the same goal, knowing that each small contribution would add up to something meaningful. A week later, I received a text from Ethan. My heart skipped a beat when I saw his name, but I didn't feel that old knot of anxiety that used to tie itself in my chest. It was strange, but I wasn't afraid anymore. I opened the message. It read, "I'm sorry. I messed up. I've lost everything. And I realize now that I hurt you more than I could ever make up for. I'm not asking for forgiveness, but I just wanted to say that you were right. You were always right. I'm sorry." I stared at the screen for a long time. There was no part of me that wanted to respond, no part of me that wanted to re-enter that world. But I wasn't angry. In fact, I felt a sense of pity for him. He was just another man who had built his world on manipulation, on lies, and now he had to face the consequences of it. I had already moved on. I didn't reply. And just like that, Ethan was gone from my life. The next few months were a blur of coding, meetings, and late nights with Maya as we worked on our app. We launched a beta version for a few nonprofits we were close to, and the response was overwhelmingly positive. For the first time, I felt like I was part of something that mattered, something that would actually change the world. I never thought it would feel this good to do something meaningful. That evening, after we'd finished another round of coding, Maya turned to me. She had that smile again, the one that made my heart skip a beat. "You know," she said softly, "I've been thinking. Maybe we should take this seriously. Maybe we should make this a partnership. Not just the app. Everything. Us." I couldn't help but smile. "I think I'd like that," I said, my voice steady, my heart full. We didn't need grand gestures, expensive dinners, or any kind of drama. What we had was real, and that was enough. As I sat back, looking at the work we had created together, I thought about how far I had come. From the chaos, the manipulation, the lies, I had found a way out. I had found peace. I had found someone who saw me for who I truly was, and I had found my way back to myself. Sometimes the numbers really do add up. They show you the truth, who you are, what you're worth, and who is worthy of your time. And for once, I wasn't afraid to see it all clearly.